Today we're gonna take care of the engine. We're looking for about 20 missing horses according to my ass dyno at least. But before that we need to take care of a safety hazard, for which I'm gonna need this broom. And this is the beating heart of our little project car. This is the 1.6 liter turbo diesel engine from 1988. Back in the day it had 70 horsepower, but I feel like some of it is missing, about 15, maybe 20. So I want to find out why. My main suspect is the fuel pump and the overall timing of the engine, because that's what most people usually get wrong. Once we're done with that, we're gonna give it a good overall service and we're gonna call it a day. The reason I'm suspecting the timing is because it's not only running a bit rough, but also the throttle isn't very responsive, and that's what usually happens when you don't have enough or you have too much advance on the injection timing. Yeah, something is off. With the valve cover off, we have access to all the timing marks we need. The camshaft is biting on my 17mm wrench over here. It fits quite snugly and it's flush with the head. That's what we need. It's important to remove the gasket, by the way, because it can give you a false sense of security. For the fuel pump, we have this notch here, which I've painted with white marker. This needs to be aligned first with this mark over here, and then with the mark on the sprocket here as well. And you can lock it using a 15mm rod. Make sure it goes all the way and it fits quite snugly. And of course the crankshaft is on top dead center. We can verify that with the mark on the pressure plate. With all the timing marks aligned, this means that the engine is in time. The camshaft and the crankshaft are timed well, and the fuel pump's rough timing is set correctly. If you're just replacing the belt, you can loosen it with everything locked in place and assemble it back and tighten the belt, check the marks, and you should be good to go. But because we're looking for a horsepower problem, we're going to check the fine-tuning of the fuel pump and see if the advanced position is set correctly. Now they say that carpenters measure down to a centimeter, mechanics measure down to a millimeter, but for today's exercise we're going to need to measure down to 1/100 of a millimeter. For the measurement, we're going to need to remove the center bolt here on the back of the pump and install the gauge so we can see how far the piston is at top dead center. For better access, I'm gonna remove this hose as well. Be careful, there is a copper washer here, don't lose it. For my micrometer, I have this piece, which is a custom extension. This is the special tool. My dad had it made on a lathe, and this is just to give you better access. The micrometer itself is pretty standard. I'm just gonna lock it here with this glow plug. That's firmly in place. Perfect. Now here's how the procedure goes. Currently we're at top dead center. We're gonna turn the engine backwards until the needle of the gauge stops spinning. We're gonna zero out the gauge with the dial, and we're gonna turn the engine back to top dead center. We're looking for a measurement of 86 hundredths plus or minus 2. That's according to the Bentley manual. And also, when you're doing this, on the back of the pump, this is where the cold start lever comes in. You want to make sure it's pushed all the way in from the dashboard, and then you can push it a bit further down to take up all the slack on this side, because this gives advance as well. Step 1, turn the engine backwards until the gauge stops spinning. I'm using the bolt on the camshaft. Ideally you would use the one on the crankshaft, it's just harder to access. Okay, so the gauge stopped spinning. Now I'm gonna zero it out. And I'm gonna turn the engine forwards to top dead center. This is the advance we currently have on the engine. It's 1 millimeter and 4.5, maybe 5 hundredths, and it needs to be at 86 hundredths. This means that the fuel pump is injecting the fuel way too early, and that's why we have low power and a lot of smoke coming out the exhaust. We're gonna tune that back to spec, but I want to replace the belt first and then do the fine tuning with the new belt. That way I can tighten everything up and know it's neat. Before I loosen the belt, we need to take off the lower timing cover, and for that we need to take off both of the auxiliary belts. First I'm gonna remove this pulley and take out the outer belt, and then loosen the second one from the alternator, take that out as well. I want to take a minute to explain the pulley system on the bus, because most people don't know this and they get confused sometimes. If you have this engine on a Golf or a Passat, something like that, you're not going to have this double belt system, but on the bus you have two belts. On the crankshaft we have the outer pulley driving the water pump, and this is because the bus needs a smaller radius on the water pump to give it higher RPM and drive the water all the way to the front of the bus where the radiator is. There is simply more resistance, and this helps with the cooling. The spacers here are what's used to tighten the belt. The more spacers you put in between, the looser the belt is, because it's gonna sit further down this diameter and it's gonna have a smaller radius to go around. The fewer spacers you put in, the further out the belt moves and the tighter it's gonna get. And of course, next from this pulley, the alternator gets driven, and this belt is tightened with the alternator. Removing the belt is really easy. All you have to do is undo this 15mm nut. At this point you will install the new belt, but before that I want to take off both the pulleys, because I can see all of this oil leaking from here and down there as well. So I want to replace the seals. So we're at the low point of the episode again. This diesel stuff is nasty. Like, I usually work on petrol engines mostly, and this is just too nasty. Yesterday I was thinking how deep I want to clean this, because I think this seal is leaking, and to change this seal I need to take out the camshaft, and for that I need to take out the sprocket, and I think the bottom seal is also leaking, so I took that sprocket out. But in order to take the small one in, I either take out the camshaft and put the bus in gear and hope that that's enough to undo it, or I can take the sump out, put a piece of wood in there and block the crankshaft that way and undo this nut. And then I'm gonna have to torque it and use some Loctite on it, because this is the most responsible bolt here. And taking the sump off isn't particularly easy either. You have the exhaust that's connected to it. On the back side you have two bolts coming from the gearbox. You have the filler tube, which I also think is leaking, and on the back you have the line from the turbo, and then a bajillion and 20,000 bolts all around. But I figured I'm in this deep, so I might as well keep going. I can almost see the light at the end of the tunnel anyways. Can I undo the bolt on the crankshaft with just compression and the car being in gear? Easy. So I ended up dropping the exhaust a little bit so that I can have access to torque the crankshaft pulley. Well, both pulleys actually, the big bolt and the little ones. I also installed the belt cover and the big pulley. Now I'm gonna do some cleaning over here and install back the sump. Sit rep. everything on the bottom side of the engine is installed. I torqued the crankshaft pulleys and I'm leaving the exhaust down so I can turn the engine from here. We have the timing belt in place. Now all that's left is to install the camshaft, time the engine and fine-tune the fuel pump. Now it's time to install the belt. The crankshaft is at top dead center. The camshaft is locked top dead center. I'm gonna lock the fuel pump as well. And normally you would install it by the tensioner pulley, but since I have the camshaft pulley off, I'm gonna install the belt using that because it's a bit easier. Now let's check the marks. And once you have your final position, then you can tighten the sprocket. I put my own mark on this side of the pulley because it's a bit easier to see. And now I'm gonna turn the engine twice over. That's one. And that's two. Now let's check the marks. Fuel pump is locked in place. Camshaft is locked and the crankshaft is spot on. With the rough timing set, we can move on to the fine tuning of the fuel pump and then we'll check everything once again. Alright, now we're at top dead center. All the locks are removed, so I'm gonna turn the engine backwards until the needle stops. Alright, zero out the gauge. And now we go forward to TDC. And we're at 92.5. Now we are gonna loosen the bolts of the pump and we're gonna turn it just a tiny bit. Yesterday my camera ran out of battery. I replaced the thermostat off camera. And now there's some final things to do, like assemble the intake pipes, change the fuel and air filter, and put the exhaust back on. And then we can do the first start. Apparently I got the wrong belts. I got two 10x650 belts, but it turns out that the one for the water pump is a bit too long, so I'm gonna have to get a shorter one. It's just not as tight as I would like it to be. For a test start, it's good enough. Coolant is topped off, oil is topped off. I checked all the bolts. Gonna run without the cover because I want to see how the belt rolls. And we're looking to see if these belts will roll as well. But I think we're ready for the first start. My pants are somewhat clean today, so I'm using a rag. After everything you saw me do, this was supposed to be a 3 or 4 or 5 day quick service, tune-up and back on the road kind of thing. It wasn't. I've spent about 4 weeks now on this job only. I wasn't doing only this, of course, there were some distractions and other bits, but all in all, pretty slow. After I did the initial reassembly, I started the bus, it was still leaking oil and it developed a fuel leak as well from the fuel pump. So I took the timing belt apart, took the fuel pump to a diesel guy, he checked it out, sorted it out, said everything's perfect, replaced a couple of seals for the leak and gave it back to me. We also serviced the injectors, gave them a bit of a cleaning. He said they're not perfect, but they will do for now. I came back, did the timing belt again and hooked everything as it was supposed to be. I replaced the intermediate shaft seal because I suspected that what might be the one that's leaking. Still, despite the fact that I had replaced it, it wasn't. And then I patched up the oil filler neck because I suspected that the leak may be coming from there. But there was still oil pouring out and it was just a mist of oil, I couldn't tell where it's from. So I found that the dipstick is also just bobbing about in its hole. There was no seal, rubber, anything holding it in place and providing any sort of seal. So I sealed it up nicely with Rinse Seal and I think we're done with the oil leaks for now. Power wise, I took it for a test drive yesterday. The power isn't impressive. Scratch that, it's disappointing. I was hoping that it would be a bit better after the tuning and sorting out the fuel and everything, but it's just, maybe I'm just used to the GTI too much, I don't know, but it's discouraging. And this made me very disappointed, so I'm considering doing the engine swap now instead of at the end of the season because I don't want to bob about on the road doing 70 and struggling on hill climbs. I was planning on moving forward with the camper conversion. I got a pop top and a brand new canvas over there, but right now I'm slowing down a little bit and considering whether I should put it on this bus or on Sunny, the beige GTI one, because I was really excited for using it this season and I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to make it with this one. There's still a lot of work to happen and I need to decide whether or not I want to convert the engine now, live with this engine and move forward, or put the pop top on Sunny. So that's something I need to discuss with myself. And on this disappointing note, I'm gonna end this episode here. I hope you enjoyed my misery with the diesel. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Should I swap it right away or should I drive at 60 all summer long and go nowhere in time? Also, consider subscribing, there's more to come. Thank you for watching, bye!